Welcome to the Channel Surfers. I'm John McCabe, and I'm joined, as always, by my good friend and co-host Jeff Lennon. How you doing, Jeff?
Hey, John. Doing well, man. Doing well. Ready to get at it this week.
Great, glad to hear it. So, you know, Jeff, you and I have been in this industry for a while, and lately we've been seeing a lot of our good friends and people that are in the channel and in the tech space in general, losing their jobs. And I don't think there's a day that goes by in LinkedIn where I see someone who's posting about, they're looking for work. And what we want to talk about today is, navigating layoffs in today's market. We want to focus on, how professionals, especially in that tech industry, cybersecurity industry, and channel sales, are dealing with layoffs in, a very tough market, which doesn't seem to be getting much better after the elections, which we thought would be, opening things up, but unfortunately it isn't. Um, you know, I think this is a very important topic for our listeners because even though you might have a job now, there's a possibility you won't tomorrow. I mean, especially in channel. I think channel is very volatile. You could be the first to be let go because, if revenue's not there, they're not going to keep a channel team in place. They might just filter that out to the sales reps to manage the channel partnerships. Um, you know, the market conditions are just very tough right now. I don't see a lot of companies buying or budgets being opened up or spending happening. So that's a warning sign to that times are going to get tougher before they get better. And there's really this emotional and financial impact to each individual you're smiling. I know because we both have lived this, right? There's like what we could say the five stages of death, right? I think that's what being laid off is like. There's the shock, the denial, the coming to terms and accepting. I don't have all the steps at my fingertips, but you get the gist of that, right?
Oh, yeah. Everybody, look, if first of all, it's an interesting subject, right?
Mhm.
Because it's extremely relevant and extremely prevalent, or prevalent, excuse me, you
Mhm.
know, right now today.
Yeah.
I just made the comment with somebody. I was actually traveling last week and on some personal vacation time, and while I was sitting at the airport yesterday, I was amazed at the amount of people that I am seeing. Hey, I'm starting a new job, which is great,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But there is the downside of that because I have also seen where probably about 30%, 40% of the people that are posting that they have a new job. I was surprised at the amount of people that had posted over the past 2 days. Hey, I find myself in a situation, and they got the green circle on LinkedIn, and I'm in a situation. If anybody knows of opportunities, which
Yeah.
that's a whole different conversation for me. I come from a generation of, hey man, like yeah, reach out to your circle, but don't put up a billboard. But kind of LinkedIn wants everybody to put up a billboard and say, hey, look, I need a job, which isn't a
Yeah.
bad thing.
For sure.
Um, but to your point, yeah, there are a lot of steps. You made a couple points there, which I think we probably should drill in because I think the economy and the state of things right now are there's two factors. One is there's a lot of uncertainty in the
Mhm.
market,
Yeah.
with tariffs and all that, and people are like, oh, how do we spend money?
Yeah.
What is that impact going to be, regardless if it's in the technology space, because you don't know how that's going to impact it if somebody's selling appliance, the hardware and all that. But I guess my point is, there's when there's uncertainty, it creates a bit of hesitation for people to want to bring on people. In some respects, I mean, right now I know a lot of people, at least six off the top of my head, that have now moved into AI companies, which
Hmm.
is great. But I think really the topic of the conversation is, with these situations and, companies looking to conserve costs, cut costs, reorg, re-engineer, riffs, there's so many different little tweaks and nuance to the names of it. But at the end of the day, I mean, people are being let go. And
Yep.
I, I shared this with you. I mean, if you haven't been in that situation, you're either not putting yourself in a position where you're putting yourself out there, because if you put yourself out there and you're really trying to do something, there is a good chance that, when if the company has to pivot, you may be part of that.
Yep.
I used to think the other one, that it was the other thing, like, oh, if you're getting let go, like it must be a bad thing. And sometimes it just happens. It just,
Yeah.
the company makes a change. You're part of a numbering system, regardless. You could be in one of my instances, I was one of the top channel people. I was managing, basically they had expanded two commercial teams and helping, oversee the federal growth and the federal rollout of the channel team. And, due to COVID, they just said, hey, we're going to get rid of 30% of the company, or
Yeah.
28%.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, overnight it was like, hey, it's not personal, but we're going to go in this direction.
No, but you brought up a great point, and in the immortal words of Ross Geller, you need to pivot. So that's something we want to talk about, right? And I think today this is going to be a two-part series. Today we're going to talk about the reality of layoffs and basically what the hiring insights and market trends are that we see, right? And I think you brought up a lot of great points about, you were a top performer. And honestly, like for those of you in the audience who don't know Jeff,
Yeah.
he's been a top performer. Sorry, I need to let them know. He's been a top performer wherever he goes. And, it's that shock when you're at your best and you feel like confident and you feel great about being at a company, and then they pull the rug out from underneath you. That happened to me just recently at the same company that you got laid off from. I got laid off as well. So I think first and foremost, when someone gets that call, that invite from their manager, and they show up to the call, and an HR representative is on with your manager, that right away it's not a good call, right? And you're going to be let go. And I had it happen to me a couple times. A couple times I was like, yeah, I expected it. Times were tough. The company wasn't selling. And then there were two times that, I just was shocked because I was doing a great job, just like you had said, right? And it took a while. The first time it happened, it really took me a long time to get over it. In fact, I'm still a little bitter at the guy that did it to me. And it's like, it's like 5 years later, right? But you have to adjust, right? And one thing I've tried to do, and you could kind of fill us in on what your thought process was. I don't look at it as a negative. There's that famous saying, when one door closes, another one opens, and I've always taken that approach. And you know, layoffs happen for various reasons. Revenue is tight. In your case, it was a COVID issue, or they panicked a little bit about.
Well, it was revenue though. I mean,
It
so
was.
so
Yeah.
without getting, yeah, it was absolutely revenue. I mean, think about it. You had a situation that had never historically, at least in my lifetime, had ever happened. Most businesses kind of paused, and I'm being polite. I mean, a lot of businesses were
Oh yeah.
paralyzed because
Yeah.
they
Sure.
did not know what was going to happen, what they should do. So what ended up happening is, like, projects were frozen, right, or paused,
Hmm.
and that had a ripple effect. And when you pause for a company that's selling, trying to get their solution out there, and those projects at vendors are now paused, if it's 20, 30, 40 or more, that is a significant impact of revenue and the revenue stream of the
Yeah.
organization, right? So,
Sure.
I mean, obviously it was but I got it. Like, I understood it. It still sucked, right? It still
Yeah.
hurts. Hey, it's a bit of a gut punch, especially like you said, when you feel like you're on top of your game and you're crushing things. Um, but that's, that's life, man. I mean, that's what happens. So it's
Yeah.
like, okay, and I think you hit it right on the head. It's like, what do you do after the pivot? you know, because it's going to happen. And
Well.
I just see it more and more prevalent right now. I call it, the quiet riffs. Back in the day, I worked for a very large equipment manufacturer, 3-letter name with a square in the corner. And I think basically they were following the Jack Welch methodology, which was always, if you've ever read the book Winning, it's on my bookshelf over here. But if you've ever read Jack Welch's Winning, right, it's always about the bottom 10%. Well, if you think about that, that means that, you know, at the minimum every year, 10% of the comp, you're letting go of the bottom 10%. Why? Because it creates this philosophy of, hey, man, you got to perform. And
Yeah.
the one thing you want to make sure is you're not in that bottom 10. But my point is, there were also these mid-year kind of things that would happen, a little bit smaller, a little bit quieter. The one that always got announced was right before their earnings call. But my
Hmm.
point is, there it was happening a little bit more. I see that happening a lot. I just see, and again, not to beat up PE or VCs, private equity or venture
Mm.
capitalists, but
That's a
you
whole
know,
nother show. Let me tell you, PE.
well,
Yeah.
they want revenue, and I
Yeah.
get that, but there's these quiet rifts, right? I used to talk about the dark funnel of sales, right, where there's this partner funnel, the dark funnel. There's these quiet rifts that are happening, and I think you said, this will probably be at least a two-part series. I know in the other, for me, it's all about the stories. I mean, I know I put a DM out there to see if people, wanted to share their stories. Um, Interestingly enough, I was able to talk to a handful of people over the past week and a half, being at a couple events, and I was surprised to hear, the number, at least four or five, well, so five different people within the past month
Hmm.
have been through a riff
Yeah.
reorg or consolidation, and I was
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
like, wow. And again, they were caught off guard
So
because. So go ahead.
let's examine the emotional and financial impact of being laid off. And I looked up the 5 stages of grief, right? First is denial, right? It's like, it's not happening. This didn't happen. Anger, like, why did it happen? I'm mad at the person that, my manager who let this happen. Bargaining, you try to make light of it and figure out, like, in your mind, if it's okay or not, right? Depression, because you're out of work and you got to find a job. And then, finally, acceptance. And that's where I try to get to that acceptance as soon as I can, because I don't want to dwell on it and be, bogged down by it. But I think, emotionally, I can get over that. The financial impact, and I don't know how it is for you, but, like, luckily my wife works, but we are used to two incomes. And, my income has always been significantly higher, and paid, majority of the bills, right? And when you're out of work for like 2, 3, 4, 6 months, a year. Luckily, I've only been out of work at the most 5 months, right? But when you're out a long period of time, it's so taxing on your mental, positivity, and your mental, strength.
Yeah.
And I know, you have some stories. I could tell you, like, you know, when I first got laid off for the first time, I had to sell a really, really nice watch that I coveted. I loved it, and I needed the money to pay some bills. And that's why I'm so bitter about that first layoff, because it was the first time ever I got
It
laid
was
off.
traumatic, man.
And I had to, like, sell personal, items that I really love to make bills, and make ends meet, right? So, um, but I mean, tell me about your experience. 'Cause I know you and I we've been down the same path, but we've been affected differently, right? And you know, I'm sure you have a lot of stories about that, but tell me what you think on the
Yeah, I mean,
financial impact.
no, and I appreciate that, man. I mean, look, it's, I could write a book about writing a book, um, but but it's interesting. I mean, I did something at a point in my career, and we talked about this on one of the other podcasts that we'll be releasing, right? And one of our guests made a comment. He goes, you don't go into a startup, when you have small children. That's not the best
No,
time because of,
no.
and then he gave really, really good reasons. And my joke to him was, well, that's great, but your advice is 25 years too late, because I went into my first startup. My kids were 4 and 2.
Yeah,
And, it was, and by the way, it was a partnership. I couldn't have done it without my wife and her
yep,
support to
me
do it.
too. Yeah,
But one of the things that I actually learned through that start, like, and it was, again, meeting different people, looking at the market differently, and to hear your story about the watch, it made me kind of pause, because something that I learned back in the early 2000s, because the market was going through its own shifts back then. And by the way, there was a huge, huge impact to the market, very similar to what's going on now back in 2008, just for
yeah.
people who want to go read a history book. But but that being said, one of the things that I learned was always make sure you have enough what I call liquidity or disposable money put aside to sustain yourself for 6 to 9 months. God
Yeah.
forbid,
Yeah.
barring something happen, have 6 to 9 months. Well, I took that to heart because having gone into a startup and being one of the founders and working sweat equity and all that, I realized what was really important. So from that point forward, I was actually focused on knowing my own expenses, right? So one of the jokes, or one of the,
Yeah.
not so much a joke, one of the things I always tell people when you're in business or you're being a channel person is you're the CEO of your business, you're the CEO of your territory. Run it like that. Own it. Understand where you're putting the money, understand where you're making the investments and how you leverage your time. Same thing goes for yourself, right? So when you know how much you have, how much you're spending, if something catastrophic was to happen, can you sustain everything?
Mhm.
And I mean, when I say sustain, I mean, don't change a thing. Continue to
Yeah.
live your life. That's hard.
My
It's really,
situation
really
is
hard.
kind of different. I had 2 kids in college at the time. I had a
Yeah.
freshman and a junior in college, and so we had tuition
Right.
payments and other things, just life expenses, right? So
Exactly.
I get what you're saying, but when you're dealing with college and I don't wanna share too much, but we didn't really do the college savings until it
Yeah.
was too late. And then my wife's company has a phenomenal program for that. So, but no excuses. I think you're very accurate. You should plan.
It's hard.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you should plan to have money in the bank to survive for, I would say, a year, because not saying everybody is in the same position, but it could be a year before you get a job. I know people personally that I've met with over the past 6 months who they've been out of work a year, and it could be that they're middle-aged white guys like us, or they don't have the skill sets, or they're applying for the wrong positions. But something that kind of to lead into the next segment is the hiring insights and market trends. Like, I think
Yeah.
what I see is a lot of positions posting, hundreds, if not thousands of applicants, the job posting getting pulled because there's too many applications. I think sometimes those are bait to fill a company's you know uh, archives for future hires, and they just collect resumes. They don't really have a position. Because I there's so many positions I see and I've applied for, and I usually you'll see especially with us being in the channel and cybersecurity,
Yeah.
you'll see somebody like, "Hey, I just got a job with XYZ as the VP of channels," and I'm like, "I applied for that position." But when you don't see any posting, I'm kind of suspicious. I think maybe there's a lot of harvesting of resumes that really is kind of unfair to the people that are looking and
Interesting.
trying to get something. It's taking you out of like a potential opportunity, right? And it's tough. I utilize LinkedIn as a job hunting source. I think it's pretty accurate in what it's posted, but I've also received a lot of conversations. I've been granted interviews, and I've gone far with certain companies, but for whatever reason, I wasn't a fit, right? So, I mean, what's your take on that? I think because we see and we've been in that
That's
space. What do you think about the what hiring managers, what companies are doing in terms of trying to attract the talent that's out there?
well. First of all, your perspective is interesting, right? Because we've had that conversation, and I'll kind of work backwards. So I had the opportunity to speak with an SVP at a SVP of Channel and Alliances at a fairly large technology provider, cybersecurity company, a couple of weeks ago, and it was really interesting, John, because one of the things that came up was about hiring and looking for roles, and again, just trying to feel out like where things are at. And the feedback, I was actually taken back because I'm thinking about what you just said, and you see these postings, and you go in there, and it's like it's been posted for 8 hours, right? You see it, okay, great,
Mhm.
and there's 150 applicants, and you're like, holy crap!
Mhm.
And what this person told me is the problem that they have on the other side of that equation is let's just say out of that 150, could be 60, could be 70, maybe more, are just not qualified.
Yeah.
Like, didn't
Well,
even
let me
read the
let me
job
pause you for a second.
description.
Let me ask you this question, because here's a different scenario. I've gotten an interview and I've talked to the recruiter. That's the first step in the process, always, right? And the recruiter will say, "Oh my God, your resume is amazing. You have everything we're looking for. You are qualified." And I'll trial close. I'm like, "Am I moving to the next steps? And if so, what do I need to prepare for?" And then you get to that next step, and you don't get a call back after that. And you're like, "Well, wait a minute. I was the most qualified candidate you brought in. Why am I not getting forward? Moving
So,
forward. Like,
so
what do you think of that?
So here's again my opinion, right? So that's the recruiter, right? The recruiters, their job is to get people in front of the. I'm just saying, their job is to get somebody in front of there. Their
Yeah,
job
yeah,
is to help them hire somebody, so that if they hire somebody, then they get paid or all that. If it's an internal recruiter, that's a little bit different because that's part of their job, but they also may have a quota, they may have goals, MBOs, all that. But I my problem is I find that as a struggle, because just because the person, and because I've had it happen, and I've leaned a lot in on stoicism over the last 8 months,
mm,
8 9 months, but and the reason is, okay, so it doesn't work out. I move on. Like, I don't want to hold on to that. But to your point, it's just because the person said, "Oh, you're a great fit," that's fantastic. But when it gets in front of the people that are actually doing the hiring, there may be 20 people that have similar requirements, similar capabilities, similar experience. And then I hate to say it, I started to say it, but it's networking, right? It's about knowing people. It's about having your network, and by the way, also being bold to actually reach out to people. I mean, I don't claim to be an expert on that.
yeah.
I've seen the challenge, but it is about being bold. It is about driving your network and doing your network stuff. I was listening to this one podcast, or LinkedIn Live, from this one guy who I started following. He was at a partner event about a week ago or last week, and he even said it. Networking is the hardest part, and it's because you got to show up, and then you got to show up, and you got to be on, right? So
Mhm.
and then you got to make sure that you do the right follow up, and that you're positioning yourself properly. And my challenge with what you just said is, like I said, that person that's saying it, they're saying it because that's their job, number one, and they're trying to get enough applicants in front of them.
So,
And
well,
so
let me ask
anyway,
you this: how do you position yourself to be successful in that hiring process? What do you do? Because I am, I like to prepare. I like to get to know the company and the executives I'm talking to, and I like to share my experience, and I think that's about everything I can do to advance my candidacy. But like, what do you do to position yourself for success in your interviewing process?
well, it's just whether it's interviewing or even selling. Back in the day, right? You just would go out. You would have to. I just remember people wouldn't even go look at the websites of companies, right? That's how old I am, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
and so you're interviewing somebody. It's like, well, can you tell us what we do? And to be honest, the technology has made it so easy now to know what a company does, what their
yeah.
products are, what their solution is,
Just
what
get
the
Chad to help
differentiators.
you.
I get Chad, and then I lean into Perplexity, and then I use there's this other thing that you can do with Claude, and the whole point is you want to get it's almost like when you're in a company, and it's an old term, but when you're doing a 360 on somebody, right? So you want to do
Mhm.
a 360 review. So you want to get a bunch of people, and you want to get different perspectives about that person. Whether you're selling, and by the way, whether you're selling or you're trying to find a job, when you're trying to find a job, you're selling yourself. You now are the product. So you've got to make sure that you figure out, what is that company? What do they do? What are their needs? How do you best fit their needs? How do you best fit the direction that the company is going? Do you even understand it? And like I said, the space is going at a hyper rate at this time, and you need to take those steps. And I just think, if you're not leveraging the technology available today to give you the information to prepare yourself,
Absolutely. Yeah.
right? And then even the people you're going to be talking with, right? So who are the people in the organization? Who is the leadership? What is their background? What is the vision? What is the mission of the company? You know, does it do you understand it? Does it really resonate with you? And it sounds corny, right, for me to say that, if that's still a good word to use. But if it, if it does sound a little kind of blasé or whatever, I just think that it is meaningful, because at the end of the day, if you're gonna go to apply to a place, they want to know that you've A, done your homework, B, that there is an interest and you understand what they do, how they do what they do, and how do you align yourself to where they're going? Does it
Mhm.
make sense?
Yeah.
Um, because the last thing I want is somebody to come in and be disingenuous, right? If I was on the hiring side, um, and I'll just kind of pause and then throw it back to you. But I've also been on the other side of the fence where whether it's interviewing or being interviewed, right? I've had it. I've had people where you're like, wow, that was amazing. Like that was a bet. Like they crushed the interview, right? And for anybody that's listening to this, has hired people, you've had to have this experience where you interviewed somebody and they're like, wow, and they go back and you like they had them go through 3 or 4 people and they're like, yeah, they were great, only to find out that that's the only thing they were good at was the interview. They were able to do the interview, right, to get the position, but they couldn't actually execute on the stuff that they were talking about during the interview. I mean, I'm not throwing people, I won't name names, obviously, but I've had that happen, and it's like, so I do, coming back to the whole layoff and getting yourself prepared. It is a psychological thing, it is an emotional thing, it is a financial thing. Um, and the one thing you don't want to be is, I'll say, needy, I guess. You got to want the job, not need
Right.
it. If
Yeah.
that sound, I don't know if that makes sense, but you got to want it, not need it, sort of, and understanding where do you see yourself fitting into this? One of my favorite questions from years ago was, where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Yeah.
And God, talk about a funny story. I on an interview, I was asked that question. Now, granted, I was young, I was in my 20s, and I I basically just kind of looked right at the guy and just went, "I'm going to have your job, probably. I don't know, 5 years, yeah, or less." Um, he thought it was really cocky, but he also liked it because he liked the aggressiveness. But and we ended up becoming really good friends after that. But needless to say, I did get the job, but I always joked about that and I said, wow, like, I don't know why, but the more I thought about it over time, is I was so comfortable and relaxed in that interview, that with him, that I kind of said it, but I didn't say it in a mean, or I said it kind of in a tongue in cheek, kind of joking way, like, I'll probably have your job, right? Um, but getting back to your point, it's about just being prepared, right? To answer your
Yeah.
question, being prepared, understanding the company, and understanding the network and the people that you're going to work for. And again, when I say networking, figuring out who the people are, but also figuring out, do you have people in your network that can vouch for you,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? It comes back to the near bound thing. Do you have people that can actually talk about you in the rooms when you're not there?
Network is key. I don't know how many times we've talked about that on our show, but having a network is strong, and that has helped me in the times that I've been out of work. Especially, let's look at partnership leaders. Asher Matthew, who we did an interview with, and you'll hear in a couple weeks. He was instrumental in helping me when I was out of work. People I know, like you, and people I've worked with, they vouch for me, and they help me get through the process a little bit better, right? So we're
Yeah.
actually coming up on the end of our show here. I think what we want to talk about in the next episode, we're going to break this into two parts because I think it's really important, and it has a lot of parts and pieces to discuss. But for the next show, we want to talk about stories from those who are affected. We did ask for our listeners to send us, their own stories, but we've talked and we know people who are in situations. And I want you to talk about that event you were at last week and the people you talked to who were in that situation, because that is just valuable information. And then, talk about strategies for bouncing back, and kind of keep it so, what we've done, what I've done to get back in the workflow, and workspace, what you've done, how you deal with it mentally. I think it's not an easy thing to deal with, and you got to be strong, and you got to, overcome it and not wallow. So we'll talk about that as well. But just to kind of conclude what we're talking about today, and by the way, great insight on your part. You really have a lot of great points to share.
I,
But
I've made a lot of mistakes, had a lot of failures, right? If you're not
so have we,
failing, you're
yeah,
not.
everybody, yeah, I agree. And you
But
know what? I
I
don't
know you
think
want to
failure
get
is
there.
bad.
Yeah, well, failure is learning, right?
Yeah.
If you failed at something, you're going to learn from it. But I'll kind
Yeah.
of leave this, right? My takeaway around this pivot or the bouncing back from the situation is number one, make sure you have a clear, clean mindset about who you are, what you're trying to do. Go look at your personal branding, look at your LinkedIn, look at your other social profiles, and what you're doing with it. I would definitely leverage your network, dig into that, figure out where that may help you,
Yeah.
kind of help you project you, and then really upskilling yourself, certifications, trainings, going through those things. I mean, I did a lot of that a couple times, and because part of it was the shift, right? As we shifted to cloud, I went through and I did the AWS stuff, I did the Microsoft stuff, get myself familiar with the cloud and the practitioner space and understanding the security changes.
Mhm.
And then the last is, which is kind of what brought us to where we are even now, is exploring new paths, taking and putting yourself out there to explore, whether it's going to be freelancing, consulting, those types of
Mhm.
things.
Yep.
I've had that conversation with a lot of people to don't feel like this is the end. This is the potential to move in a different direction. You still can come back on the path again, but you have skills and knowledge. Go figure out how
Yeah.
to leverage.
We'll definitely talk about that in the next episode because I think it's important. Just because of what we've experienced, and we kind of said enough's enough. We want to, own our own destiny and control, or I should say, control our own
Hey,
destiny.
man.
You know. So okay, well, I think we had a great first part of this topic. Navigating layoffs in today's market. It's never easy for anyone, but hopefully we can help you. And like we said earlier, we posted a request for anyone to send us your situation and what you've gone through. We'd love to share it with the audience. We won't share names. We'll just share the situation. But if you're listening and you want to share, just go to our LinkedIn page, the Channel Surfers, and send us a DM, and we'll love to hear from you. You could find us on all of the podcasting services now. Just look for Channel Surfers or the Channel Surfers. We also have our website, www.channelsurfers.com, and you could reach out to us through the website as well. But Jeff, as always, insightful and great topic and great conversation. And until our next episode, part 2 of navigating layoffs in today's market, we'll take a pause and come back and share more knowledge.
Absolutely, man. John, thank you, man. Appreciate the time today.
You got it. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Jeff. Bye.